She should get to keep the ring.
She gets to keep the ring.
Yeah, I think she should get
She should keep it. Okay. Any other thoughts? Anybody else has any thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't mind giving it back. I personally probably would give it back just because I don't want. I don't. If I feel that we're not gonna work out, then why do I need to keep the ring? Unless I'm just keeping it for my own financial thing. But I mean, I don't need it, and I don't want that person to be like, oh, she owes me, or I bought her this very expensive thing, and no, take your ring and skedaddle. We're even.
Too a little bit gracious. Yeah, you should give it back. But if he says no, keep it. And just do whatever you want with it.
Yeah. But if it's not expensive, I don't think it's gonna stay cheap.
What was that, Matthew? You were saying?
Sorry.
You could be talking for say it works out that you keep it. I mean, not if you keep it, you keep it. But I mean, if the next guy comes in and he's like, okay, well, you had an engagement ring for the other guy, he might be like, why you still have a reminder of the last guy? It could be a possibility. I mean, that again, you'd have to cross the bridge when you get to it. But I mean, that would be like, okay, so why are you hanging on to it? Or I mean, if it's a nice ring, I'm not opposed to you keeping it. I mean, if that's me, I'd be like, well, yeah, I mean, it's a nice ring, but I mean, it could be awkward where it's like, okay, so you didn't marry him, but his ring's nicer than mine, and a guy might take issue with that. I mean, that guy could take issue with his ring's better than my ring, because that could play in, and then someone could say, well, she might not have gone with him, but he had deeper pockets and better taste than you do, and that a guy could take issue with that. So, I mean, like, that's something that, ladies, you're watching and you wonder, should I keep her or not? It's up to you ultimately, but just understand that guy might be walking into a sticky situation coming in where there's comparison, and the thing is guys will say that to other guys, we'll say that. Ladies might be like, oh man, that's not nice to do a guy, but a guy will say, man, the guy who she would have a guy that was wealthier than you are because you can't hardly get her anything. That guys will say things like that to other guys. So at times. So I mean, I just maybe out of consideration, maybe the next guy coming in, if that situation happens, he might be up against it. So I mean, that's just a thought. It might not happen. That's just a thought that came to mind. I just at least wanted to share it. So
with all that said, what about ill feelings after the courtship or the dating thing didn't work out? What about bitterness? How would you handle bitterness?
I think you have to pray about it.
Yeah. Been there.
I think you shouldn't. Like, honestly, bitterness comes in with my perspective is that bitterness comes in with how the relationship was handled. For example, if you are going to, I've heard this analogy before, you are looking for a company to work for, right? You know what kind of a job you're looking for. And you go for an interview, they call you in, they're looking to see whether you're a good candidate for their company, and you're looking to see whether it's a good fit, right, for you in terms of what you want to be doing. If they tell you that your duties are something that you're just like, that's not really what I want to do, or if they tell you like, it's not what we're looking for. I mean, is there disappointment? Maybe for just the time that you wasted, like getting ready and going, or, just the fact that you're not closing the deal at that particular time. But should you be like bitter or have angry feelings about like getting told no? I think not, because that that's not what you wanted, it's not a good fit. It's not a good fit. But if you now have been dating and then things happen within the relationship where either somebody mistreats you and you bypass that because you're just like, this is the one, or lies are told and you believe them, or you do get physically intimate and people, are like, I gave my all to this person, and, and it doesn't amount to whatever you thought it was going to amount to, then that's where bitterness can sink in. Or even just like when we build when we build super tight emotional bonds with each other, that can lead to bitterness as well.
I think you have to just, kind of like you said, I think that's why I think it's important during that process of dating or courting is to guard your heart for that reason and have those boundaries, especially like when it comes to physical things, because you can get really tied in. And even emotionally too. And I think sometimes we have to check our emotional health before we jump into something, because sometimes people follow that phrase of the best way to get over someone is to get under someone, basically find you a new person. And people try to heal with this new person. And it's just like, it's not good. It's unhealthy. And that relationship becomes very unhealthy because you're not over the last person. So now, you're kind of dragging somebody else into your hurt. And so I think we have to learn how to, take some time and really make sure that we're emotionally healthy for relationships. And I think we have to understand too, is that, as human beings, we don't like rejection. We don't like that somebody told us no, or someone doesn't want to be with us, and that's hard sometimes. It's very hard. But I think we have to check ourselves with that as well. Realize that, okay, then maybe it's just not meant to be. And you never know, maybe it will be later on, you never know, but you have to kind of accept it for what it is, and allow yourself to heal from it if it is hurting you, and really check your spirit about it as well, And that's why I kind of say people should really pray about it and really have like accountability to kind of help them, and just be like, hey bro, hey sis, like chill out, that just ain't the one. It's okay, keep it moving. And I think that's why we have to just, like I said, be so careful, be mindful of our emotional state, basically, and also to really set right boundaries with ourselves so that we're not finding ourselves, and I'm trying to refrain from using that word, tangled up into something. So I hate it when everybody uses that word. So I'm like,
Well, that is the name of a Disney movie, Tangled.
The other word.
I know, that's why I was trying to avoid saying it. Go ahead, Matt.
I got you on that. I think the biggest thing that causes that is unfair expectations in the other person. So now you become bitter when they don't fulfill it. Exactly. We talked about that in our previous episodes about, having God expectations on human connections. But that also can come from, it's how does the bitterness take root? Does it take root because of the expectations that you put on the relationship, or because you followed someone else's advice to try and force something because you felt pressure to just be in something? This one thing that I always say you have to really take into account. Other people don't have to live with the consequences of their advice like you do. So they might say, oh, so-and-so is great for you, well, but they don't have to be in a relationship with so-and-so like I do. So I go and get in a relationship with so-and-so. I now have expectations. She has expectations because she feels like she has to have expectations, and then it doesn't work out. And now we break up, or we fall out, we have fallen out. And then now all of a sudden we're both bitter. Now we have to see each other, whether it be at work or at church or in the neighborhood or at school, depending on if you're still in school or not, wherever it happens. And so now you still have to cross that. And that's another thing. What if you have to actually still see that person on a regular basis because of work or because you go to church together? Now what do you do? It's like, particularly if you see them get in another relationship or they end up getting married, or you see that they have success in their life, you're over here saying, oh, that's so good to see them succeeding. So how do you handle that? And that's, I think, Amber, you mentioned, like, you have to pray about it, because as Christians, we have to, particularly if they are a Christian themselves, you have to rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. You have to be like, okay, you have to walk in forgiveness. That doesn't mean you have to be like, lovey-dovey with them and say, oh, it's so good to see you succeed. You just be like, that's great. You just move on, because, and that's again, that's the thing, but God has to heal you. And that ultimately comes into where were you going in the first place? Because if it doesn't work out, there's going to be a scar there, and you have to turn that over to God, because if you try and heal on your own, you self-medicate, you're going to pick another relationship, and you're going to project that onto that person, or it might not even be a relationship. You might pick something else to drown it out in, and you're also not going to God to heal that wound. So that's where the toxic cycle, go in, whether it's a relationship where you turn to a substance or an addiction of some kind, you're still not letting God heal that wound. So, I mean, you can either get better and pick another relationship and heal that way, or pick something else and heal that way. But either way, it's dangerous, because you're not letting God heal that wound. And then to prevent that wound from even happening, just ask yourself, what expectations am I projecting on this person? And if it's not, if it's more than that individual can fulfill, then you're putting the wrong expectations on them. You need to go right back vertical with it. So, I mean, those are just some things to consider.
Yeah, Matt, I actually think you can take your advice and flip it around. That sometimes, especially as guys, women deal with this too, but your self expectation. We are harder on ourselves of being the person that we are, quote unquote, in love with wants us to become. So, they may want you to do something with your weight. They may want you to do something with your clothes, something with your something, whatever the something is. They want something from you. And it's okay to give advice, but what happens is it can become a transactional relationship in regards to dating. So that could turn to something very negative very quickly, where, I have to speak the proper English and not use any slang because my woman doesn't want me to use slang, and then let's say you use slang all your life. What they're doing essentially is trying to change you into a Stepford person, husband or wife, whatever you want to call it. You're becoming a robot. Spoiler alert, that's what happens in Stepford Wives. But you're becoming a robot and less of yourself. And basically they're trying to transform you into what they have in their head, and basically Frankenstein you into their perfect spouse.
Yeah, and that's where I think that's just someone you don't need to be with, because they don't love or accept you as the way you are. You should be with someone who accepts themselves as they are and accept you as you are. Like, they have to accept wholeheartedly you, and you have to accept wholeheartedly them. And if you can't do that, you don't need to be with them, like, at all. Because, I mean, we're human beings. We have flaws. You have to accept people at face value, not mold them and make them into what you want them to be, or be like, well, they have the potential to be this. This is who they are. It may or may not change, but this is where they're at. Sometimes people have a tendency to say the same. So you got to accept them as they are, and you got to be with somebody who accepts themselves, because that can end very badly on the other end, because there's a lot of women and even men who shape and mold themselves to whatever so that person will accept and love them. And really, they're just hurt. It's a response to something that's happened to them. And that person's not healthy for you. And because they're trying to mold and be something that they're just not. So I think two people need to be themselves and need to be open and need to be accepting of each other. And if it's, go ahead.
Then you have like the self-conscious of they're not liking the real me, but have to keep this image up, have to keep the facade up and the charade going, because they don't like me for who I am. So now I have to like remember who I was last week so I can be that person again. Then you're living a lie, and then you have to live another lie. Then you have to remember the lie you're living, and then that adds pressure. And then if you slip up, you're like, oh, maybe they caught on to the lie of who I really am. Maybe I'm not. And it's just, man, at least, as Ryan Leake says, at least they know, at least let them reject the real you, like at least they know who you really are. At least they don't like you for you, at least they know who you are. And so then they reject you for that. And you're just like, well, I mean, it's what you get. And it brings more peace for you. So.
Yeah, because I mean, it's just awful to just be like, yeah, I like you, but you need to do this, this, and that to yourself, and then I'll like you even more. Like, that's just not right to do somebody like that. And it's very critical and nitpicky. And that's not love. So love is accepting them as they are. You know, you know, you can set boundaries. Love has boundaries sometimes with certain things, but like love is loving them as they are, understanding that they're goofy. Sometimes their clothes don't match. Okay, there are days when maybe they forget to put on deodorant, but you still love them as they are. You know, you still love them. You may have to gently remind them, hey, say, hey, put on your deodorant today. You know, or you know, maybe help them out with the socks, you know, but you love and accept them as they are, you know. So
So I guess this leads to one of my last questions. What about rejection? Like this kind of relates to bitterness, but how do you think you should handle rejection? Not necessarily just, hey, we're not going to date, but just in general, how do we handle rejection? Because how we handle rejection in other avenues, it helps to define how we shape our rejection in more serious relationship avenues. So, if Matt, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I could. I was just waiting for. I didn't want to jump on anybody. I think rejection.
We're also polite.
Yeah, no, we don't want to step on each other's toes, and we all have the same idea at the same time. It's kind of funny. I don't. I'm not a big fan of rejection because I have a lot of, you know, I'm a people pleaser. So, and no one's a fan of it, but I think some people just handle it uh, better maybe than others. I'm definitely not one of those that handles it really good, you know, I mean, because I want to be loved and appreciated. I'm a words of affirmation and physical touch guy. Those are my love languages. So if I'm not getting those, I'm feeling rejected to some degree. And I think the way you handle it, it all comes back down. Who are you? Whose are you? Who, you know, I mean, like, what's your identity in Christ? You know, like, if you know who you are in Christ Jesus, and that's where your identity is tied to that relationship, not your relationship with anybody else. That doesn't mean you can't have great relationships elsewhere and want to be accepted and be accepted. I'm just saying, like, he's your ultimate definer of who you are, you know, and if you don't do that, I mean, even when you do that, it's easy to feel rejected because we still want that. You know, we were created to be around each other. It's not good for man to be alone. That's not just a marriage verse. That's a community verse. Like I say it all the time. Like we're meant for friendship. We're meant for relationship. You know, you see throughout scripture, that scripture, and then, you know, don't forsake the assembly of the brethren. You know, basically don't forsake being around each other. So we want to be accepted by each other. So how you handle that is, you know, don't let the rejection define who you are, because God hasn't rejected you. Okay. And I mean, I'm not to get preachy, but he hasn't rejected you. And so that's why and I have to remember that, like, I have to understand who I am in him and understand that he has the right connections, the right people for me to know. And if somebody doesn't want to be around me anymore, that's their loss, you know, and that's their loss. And, you know, God will bring people around you that are better suited for your life, and he'll bring people along in their life that's better suited for them. So you just have to take it with that approach. Now that takes a lot of maturity. And the way to have that maturity is to walk with Christ deeply and not put that burden of maturing me on somebody else. I hear people say, you know, a wife is going to mature you. You got to get married so you can, so you can become mature. It's like, well, okay, so am I now expecting her to mature me? That's an unfair expectation. So if I'm expecting a person to mature me, then they reject me, now I'm like, oh, now I lose out on that. Again, it's a wrong expectation. So again, it just goes back to what are your expectations in the person? What's your identity, and what's your identity in Christ? And if the other person has your identity, and they run away, then now they steal your identity. That's where a lot of rejection comes from. So that's a very dangerous place to be. That's why I always put it straight up straight up vertical, so I know that ain't going anywhere. So and then that kind of helps you walk through seasons of rejection or encounters that didn't go that well, and you say, well, you know, God still's got me. So that's my perspective on that and advice on that.
I think with rejection, sometimes, like I said, rejection is just part of life. It happens. You know, like I said, it can really hurt sometimes if you really like somebody, you know, or you know, it's just something that you really wanted. It can really, really hurt. But I think it's just kind of like what Matt was saying. It's like you have to remember that God has something better for you. And sometimes that no is not really a no, it's a not yet, maybe. But if that person, but we also too have to respect the fact that that person said no. And so sometimes people have a hard time with that. No means no. If they really want to, they'll say yes, or they will show actions. Their actions will show that it's a yes. But a no is a no, and also too, I say this to a lot of people, is that when folks are a little wishy-washy, that is also a no as well. When someone is serious about something, they will make it known that they are serious, and their actions will reflect that. So, because sometimes as human beings, and I think we all have fallen for it before too, where it's like, oh, one day they're just amazing and they say yes to me, and then another day they're just like, and I think that we have to take that as a no. Someone who's really vested, really wanting to be interested, really wanting to give their time, or really wanting to give their time, that's somebody that's a yes, and they're going to make that known. But I think when someone tells us no or shows us it's a no, believe it, and just move on, cry about it for a minute, and then dust yourself off and get up and keep going.
Yep. I think for me, I look at purpose. I'm a strong believer in the idea that every single human being has a purpose on this earth. And so, regardless of whether you're in a relationship or out of a relationship, you have a purpose to fulfill. And I think I always fall back on that. Like if I, enter into a relationship and it doesn't work out, I'm like, okay, the purpose for me for a relationship, if you look at like the Bible and how it talks about God bringing the two together, it was for them to be like a helpmeet, right, to each other. Like they were supposed to help each other to accomplish the goal and the purpose that God had given them. And so for me, it's like, okay, I'm on this journey to purpose, and I encounter someone that seems to be a potential helpmeet. I know men are not used to being referred to as a helpmeet, but but yes, they are also like it's a potential person that can help me along this journey. And you stop, you entertain that, you see whether or not it will work. And if I find that they're actually a hindrance to my purpose, or something that holds me back, then letting them go, it's painful, yes, but it's painful to stay in that place even more, and so sometimes you just gotta like keep your eye on the prize and be like, what am I here for? What is it that I ultimately want? Do I want to just be in a relationship with any and anybody, or is it that I want someone that, like you talked about earlier, Reggie, that when you guys come together, it's two kingdoms, like that song, I'm a movement by myself, but we're a force and we're together. It's like, yes, you want the best yes, and the best yes is one that is healthy, that is profitable, that is mutual. um, there's no point in trying to convince somebody to keep loving you if they don't want to, or if they don't see the good in you. There's no point in trying to continue to market yourself or like persuade the person. No. If it's a no, it's a no. Thank you for your time. Too bad you couldn't see the good. Or sometimes it's not even, it doesn't have to be toxic. Like it can just be, we're just not a good fit, and it's okay. um and you keep on with your purpose. But if you're putting your purpose in another person, or you're waiting to do that with another person, like when you find the one, quote unquote, I feel like that's when that the devastation can be more intense, because you're not living your best life. You're putting your destiny and your fulfillment and everything in another person.
No, that's great, Gracious, man. And those were all really awesome and great. We need more thoughtful discussion like this one because a lot of us we're just running around not sure what to do, what to make of life. Um, you know, I'm in my 30s and I haven't found the person that I want to be with. And there's other people out there who have not found any significant others and are just like, hey, guy, what about me? I saw my brother or my sister, they're doing this. And I mean that literally brother and sister. Sometimes it's metaphorical brothers and sisters. But the idea is just that we get a why me. We get a look at my life, God. I could use that. I would like that. But as my scenario and previously, sometimes those people have not finished baking yet. God is still working on that specific person for you in real time, and they have not decided to follow Him yet. They have not decided to accept something that you do or that is a part of you for the relationship they're going to go into. They have not grown up enough. They need more time. And at least that's the hope. Some of us will not get married. I don't know who that is. But the vast majority, most of us have a desire to get married. Some want to be priests. Fine. Enjoy your life. That's not me. That's not how I feel I'm called. I feel called to find someone who will support the things that I want to do, but I would want to support what they're doing. The idea of the two kingdoms is if you have two kingdoms, you have two kingdoms but one government. And that was the whole idea about marrying two houses. They become one house. So their power separate was already strong enough, but then they get stronger when they combine.
Yeah, I think that again, that kind of really you really touched on it. You really touched on something I really want to talk about. It's the fact that um, you come together as one and you magnify each other. Marriage is it's a magnifying glass. It enhances your life, and it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's just going to enhance it. Okay, so that's why it's important to be ready. That doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. I mean, you're never going to be like completely ready, because there's always, so you don't have to be perfect. A lot of times people think you have to be perfect. That's not true. It just goes back to like what we talked about a few episodes ago about are you compatible, are you do you have chemistry, are you competent, all those kind of things. But you don't need to just do it to get it over with. I think we can make this work. Like you just can't. You can't you can't force the issue. I always like to say that because I hear that in sports. Whenever I'm a big football fan, they're like, oh, he threw the ball in triple coverage and he forced the issue. He threw an interception. He didn't need to do it. No, it's a football term, but basically it's trying to make something happen that doesn't need to happen. A lot of times people get in relationships and they try and make it work, and that's not a relationship that you can make work. Either you got the chemistry to make it work or you don't. I mean, it's not like, I'm not saying that you don't. I'm not saying that there aren't times you have to like work at the relationship because life happens and it's a challenge. I understand like life. I understand it takes effort to have a great marriage. I understand that. I'm not saying it's going to be easy all the time. What I am saying though is if you're trying to force the chemistry and you're trying to force that, like we have to, it's just a mess. And so you have to, like he said, it's basically like two kingdoms, one government. Like basically that's basically how it is. It's two people together coming together with one purpose. And that purpose is God-given. And whenever and this is kind of how I look at marriage. And this is a very vivid analogy. This is the seriousness of this relationship. It's the most important relationship out of God that you'll ever have. It really is. and it can either lift both of you up together. It'll bring, two people come together and it lifts you up, or it's going to be like a boat anchor and it just sinks both of you. Okay, it's like there's no in between. It's either one or the other. That's why it's very important that we get this relationship right. Because if we don't get this right, we're gonna have to try and repair a lot of damage that'll have a lot of ripple effects. I didn't talk about this. We can talk about this later. But then you get children involved, then you get other families involved, like in-laws involved. Then you have all that to deal with. Then you have all, there's just a lot that happens if you don't get this right. That's why if you're single now, we'll really let God get in there and work on you, work on them, and run after your purpose, and they'll run after their purpose. And when two of you come together, and God's behind it, and you're running hard after your purposes together, two purposes will become one, and then a lot of good things will happen. But if there's that unequal yokeness in not only your faith but in your purpose, it's just going to be a disaster, total disaster.
Absolutely, Matt. And those are really great points. I really like our discussion today about, dating versus courting and just dealing with things like rejection and talking a little bit about purpose, because I do believe that those are so much important. I do think that those are pain points within the young adult community, essentially, and aren't really talked about, in kind of even within the church, everything is geared towards, married people. So it's just like singles are left to kind of wonder, But I think our discussion was really great tonight, and I think that was a really good conclusion to our evening as well. So I thank you guys so much, and I think that this is just an awesome chat that we have going on here.
Yes, I definitely agree. Always a pleasure to meet and talk with you all about these issues. Definitely, at the beginning, we started off with the question, if you are wanting to be in a relationship, how do you proceed into that? And there were, the ideas of dating or courting. But I think at the end of the day, as we just talked about, it's all about purpose and knowing what you want and being intentional about that. Whether you're dating, whether you're in a courtship, be purposeful and know what your desire is and God's desire for your life, and never feel that you are like that's the end, you are free to keep running if need be. That would be my advice. That's what I want people to understand at the end of this conversation. It's just keep running, keep chasing purpose. If you do meet someone that you're interested in, take time to evaluate them. Don't just automatically assume that they are the one, and ultimately, keep purpose in as number one.
Yeah, and I always enjoy these conversations, and it's just my prayer that this gets before thousands of young adults have this question, because I know that many people out there, in my 7 years, going on 7 years of young adult ministry, this has been a topic of like every service I've been in that's for young adults. A lot of Bible studies that I've hosted and other people have hosted, it's all talking about relationships, particularly around Valentine's, like how do we handle relationships? And there's a lot of mystery about it, particularly if you're single and you're in the church. It's all about marriage, and it's almost like, well, I'm single, and they're like, well, just get married. And they're like, well, it's not that easy in the 20th century, So I think that this is very needed, and it just, for those that watch it on Facebook, hope it blesses you, or wherever that you watch this, hope it blesses you, and just keep sharing it, because we want this to get into the hands, and before a lot of people who really need it, and that it's my prayer that it really blesses people.
Amen.
Yeah, I just want to point out, this has been a great experience. This will be our 6th episode when it comes out. And I just want to point out that we've already reached around 1,000 people who've seen our conversations already. just pointing that out, that people are watching our videos, and it's not just people who are sharing it like through Messenger or whatever, how we're sending it. People are actually stopping to watch what we have to say. And so with that in regard, I hope that we're saying good things, hope we're saying the right things, and I hope we're saying things that that uplift people. And I want to also extend that if anyone would like to join the conversation, contact one of us and let's make it happen. But I think that brings us to a close tonight, and I appreciate you guys so much and coming on. I don't know why we all coordinated today with our colors, and it just works, I guess. But you know, the Holy Spirit gonna do that, you know. Yeah, we're gonna be doing this at least for the rest of the year. Every so often we'll come together and do one of these recordings, and it's gonna bless a lot of people. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Good night.